The surface of Lake Iznik looks calm, almost deceptively peaceful, as if it has been hiding something for centuries beneath its still waters. At first glance, nothing seems unusual, just fishermen preparing their nets, soft ripples spreading across the lake, and the quiet rhythm of a town that has lived beside this water for thousands of years. But beneath this serene landscape lies a secret that remained hidden for more than 15 centuries. In 2014, during what was supposed to be a routine aerial photography survey, something unexpected appeared just below the surface of the lake. At first, it looked like nothing more than unusual shadows, rectangular shapes faintly visible beneath the water. But as researchers examined the images more closely, those shapes began to form something unmistakable. It was the unmistakable layout of a basilica, an ancient Christian church, resting silently under only a few meters of water. This discovery would soon shock archaeologists, historians, and the entire world. Because this was not just any ruin. This was a structure believed to be nearly 1,500 years old. The ancient city of Iznik, known in antiquity as Nicaea, has always been one of the most historically significant locations in Anatolia. It was here that emperors once walked, bishops gathered, and decisions were made that shaped the course of Christianity. Yet, even in a place already layered with history, no one expected to find a submerged church hidden beneath the lake itself. The basilica lies only about 20 meters from the shoreline. At its deepest point, the structure rests roughly 1.5 to 2 meters below the surface. That means, for centuries, fishermen unknowingly sailed above the remains of an ancient sacred site. For generations, local residents had no idea that beneath their everyday routines rested a forgotten chapter of early Christianity. When archaeologists finally began underwater excavations, the true scale of the structure started to emerge. Stone walls stretched outward, forming the recognizable rectangular footprint of a basilica. Columns, collapsed roof materials, and fragments of ancient architecture lay scattered across the lake bed. Each discovery raised new questions. Who built this church? Why was it here, so close to the shoreline? And perhaps most importantly, how did such a significant structure end up underwater? Initial studies suggested the basilica was constructed during the early Byzantine period. Many historians believe it may date back to the late 4th or early 5th century AD. Some theories even connect the church to Saint Neophytos, an early Christian martyr believed to have died in Nicaea. If true, that would mean the basilica was built as a memorial to a figure revered by early believers. At the time of its construction, this area was not underwater at all. Instead, the basilica stood on solid ground, likely near a harbor or lakeside road. So what changed? Geological evidence points toward a powerful earthquake in the year 740 AD. This earthquake may have caused severe structural damage, leading to the collapse of the building. Over time, rising lake levels gradually submerged the ruins. Layer by layer, sediment buried what remained. For more than a millennium, the basilica disappeared completely from human memory, until modern technology brought it back into view. The discovery quickly attracted international attention, because underwater basilicas from this early period are extremely rare. And yet, despite centuries beneath the water, many architectural elements remained surprisingly intact. Archaeologists soon realized that this site was more than just a ruin. It was a time capsule. Every stone, every fragment, preserved clues about early Christian architecture in Anatolia, and perhaps even deeper secrets still hidden beneath layers of sediment. Some findings hinted that the basilica might have been built over an even older structure. Possibly a Roman pagan temple once stood here before Christianity spread through the region. If confirmed, this would reveal a dramatic transition in religious history. A sacred site reused across centuries. Today, Lake Iznik still keeps much of its mystery. Each excavation reveals new fragments of history long thought lost. But even after years of research, many questions remain unanswered. Was the basilica destroyed solely by the earthquake? Or did changing lake levels and human activity also play a role? And what other structures might still be hidden beneath the lake's surface? Because if one basilica remained hidden for 15 centuries, what else is waiting below? Long before the basilica ever stood near the waters of Lake Iznik, the city known today as Iznik carried a very different name, Nicaea. Founded during the Hellenistic period, Nicaea quickly became one of the most strategically important cities in northwestern Anatolia. Its location placed it at the crossroads of major trade routes connecting Asia Minor to the broader Roman world. By the time Christianity began spreading across the Roman Empire, Nicaea had already grown into a thriving urban center filled with temples, administrative buildings, and public gathering spaces. This made the city an ideal location for one of the most important events in early Christian history. In the year 325 AD, Emperor Constantine called the First Council of Nicaea here. Bishops from across the Roman Empire traveled long distances to debate theological questions that would shape Christian doctrine for centuries. The council produced the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith still recited in many churches today. From that moment onward, Nicaea became permanently associated with the foundations of organized Christianity. And it is within this deeply symbolic landscape that the submerged basilica was eventually constructed. Archaeologists believe the church may have been built between the late 4th and early 5th centuries. At that time, Christianity was no longer persecuted. It was becoming the dominant religion of the Byzantine world. Churches were being built not only in major city centers, but also near pilgrimage routes and locations tied to revered figures. One of those figures may have been Saint Neophytos. According to early accounts, Neophytos was martyred in Nicaea during the Roman persecution of Christians. His story spread quickly among early believers. If the submerged basilica was indeed dedicated to him, it may have served as both a church and a pilgrimage destination. Imagine the shoreline nearly 16 centuries ago. Instead of submerged ruins, the structure would have been visible from a distance, its roof rising above the lakeside landscape. Boats traveling across the lake may have used it as a landmark. Inside, worshippers gathered beneath stone columns and open aisles. Candles flickered against painted walls. The sound of prayer echoed through the nave. But centuries of activity do not last forever. By the 8th century, the region experienced significant seismic activity. The powerful earthquake of 740 AD may have delivered the fatal blow. Columns could have collapsed. Roof sections may have given way. The once active church may have been abandoned soon after. Without maintenance, weather and time accelerated the destruction. Meanwhile, the shoreline gradually shifted. Lake levels rose. Season after season, water flooded deeper into the structure. Eventually, the basilica disappeared completely beneath the lake. Generations passed. Empires rose and fell, and the memory of the lakeside church faded into legend, or vanished entirely, until modern discovery brought the past back into view. When archaeologists began detailed mapping of the submerged basilica, they noticed something unusual beneath the main structure. Additional layers suggested earlier construction phases. This raised a provocative possibility. The basilica might have been built directly over a pre-existing sacred site. Roman records indicate that pagan temples were once common along the ancient shoreline. If a temple once stood here, it would mean the location had spiritual significance long before Christianity arrived. Such transitions were not unusual in late antiquity. Religious landscapes often evolved rather than disappeared. Today, divers continue searching beneath sediment layers for confirmation. Each discovery could reshape understanding of how sacred spaces were reused. The submerged basilica is no longer just a forgotten church. It is becoming a key to understanding the transformation of belief systems across centuries. And yet, even with new evidence, many questions remain. Was the basilica intentionally placed above an earlier shrine, or was the location chosen simply because of proximity to the lake? The answers may still lie hidden just beneath the mud. As research continues, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Lake Iznik is not merely a body of water. It is an archive, holding centuries of human history below its surface. When the submerged basilica of Lake Iznik was first identified from the air, the discovery marked only the very beginning of a much longer and far more meticulous process. Finding the outline of an ancient structure is one thing. Understanding it, stone by stone, is something entirely different. Within weeks of the discovery, teams of archaeologists, underwater engineers, and historians began organizing one of the most significant freshwater excavations in the region. Unlike ocean excavations, working in a shallow lake presents a very specific set of challenges. Lake Iznik's sediment is extremely fine. Underwater close-up showing silt easily disturbed by a diver's fin movement. Even a single misplaced movement can cloud the water completely, reducing visibility to nearly zero. This means excavation must be done slowly, sometimes only a few centimeters at a time. Before any physical digging began, researchers conducted detailed sonar scans of the site. Side-scan sonar allowed scientists to create a precise map of the structure's footprint beneath the water. These images confirmed that the basilica's layout followed a traditional early Christian architectural plan, overlay visualization showing labeled nave, aisles, and apse alignment. Once mapping was complete, divers began placing reference grids across the site. Each grid section allowed archaeologists to document the ruins systematically. Nothing was removed without being photographed, measured, and recorded. Close-up underwater photography equipment capturing stone details, because even the smallest fragment could reveal important historical information. Over time, the sediment layer began to reveal preserved structural elements. Stone wall foundation emerging from beneath silt. Sections of the basilica's main nave became clearer. The side aisles, separated by rows of columns, also began to appear. Broken column drums resting in alignment along both sides. Some column bases were still positioned exactly where they had originally been installed. This level of preservation surprised many experts. Normally, centuries underwater would scatter architectural elements far from their original positions. But here, the lake's sediment had acted like a protective blanket. In several areas, floor surfaces were still visible. Some sections even hinted at decorative patterns. These details offered rare insight into early Byzantine construction techniques. As excavation continued, divers began working deeper into the apse, the semicircular section at the eastern end of the basilica. This area would once have been the spiritual focal point of the building. Here, clergy likely performed sacred rituals. Now, only stone outlines remain, but even those outlines speak volumes. Diver tracing curved stone foundation with gloved hand. Every measurement helps confirm architectural style and historical dating. Meanwhile, another team focused on sediment analysis. By examining the layers above the ruins, researchers can estimate how quickly the structure became submerged. Laboratory shot of sediment cores being analyzed under bright light. Microscopic particles reveal environmental changes across centuries. These findings support the theory that gradual lake expansion followed the earthquake. But excavation also produced unexpected discoveries. Fragments of ceramic pottery appeared within the site. Close-up of pottery shard being carefully lifted into collection bag. Some pieces likely belong to everyday objects used by visitors or clergy. Other fragments may date to earlier Roman activity. This strengthened the possibility that an earlier structure existed beneath the basilica. Each new layer revealed a longer timeline than originally expected. The site was no longer just a single building. It had become a multi-period archaeological archive. As word spread, international experts began visiting the excavation. Marine archaeologists, historians, and conservation specialists all contributed their expertise. Because preserving submerged ruins requires specialized techniques. Exposure to air can accelerate deterioration, so some areas are intentionally left covered after recording. Sediment gently resettling over protected section. This ensures the structure remains stable for future study. Over months of careful work, the full footprint of the basilica became increasingly clear. From nave to apse, the ancient church slowly re-emerged from obscurity. Yet even as the structure revealed itself, deeper mysteries remained untouched. Some sonar readings indicated anomalies beneath the visible foundation. Sonar screen showing faint shapes below primary layer, possibly walls belonging to an earlier construction phase, or perhaps remnants of something even older. For archaeologists, this is where patience becomes essential. Excavation cannot be rushed. Every centimeter may contain evidence that reshapes the entire historical narrative. The Basilica of Lake Iznik is not just being uncovered physically, it is being reconstructed scientifically, piece by piece. And with each new discovery, the past becomes slightly less distant. Still, one question continues to echo through every stage of the excavation. If this church was only one part of a larger sacred complex, then how much more of ancient Nicaea remains hidden beneath the lake? Lake Iznik is not merely a body of water, it is an archive, holding centuries of human history below its surface. As archaeologists continued documenting the submerged basilica beneath Lake Iznik, attention gradually shifted from simply locating the structure to understanding how it had once stood in its full architectural form. From above, the ruins appear as a quiet arrangement of stones. But when examined closely, each surviving wall and foundation line begins to tell a much more detailed story. The basilica follows the traditional rectangular plan common to early Byzantine church architecture. At its center lies the nave, the long central hall where worshippers would have gathered. On either side of the nave were side aisles, separated by rows of columns. Broken column drums resting parallel to each other, partially buried in sediment. Some of these column bases remain anchored exactly where they were first installed nearly 15 centuries ago. The spacing between columns reveals the rhythm of the original interior layout. Each interval suggests a symmetrical design intended to guide movement toward the apse. The apse itself, semicircular in shape, would have served as the spiritual focal point of the building. Here, the altar likely once stood. Fragments of stonework indicate that the apse may have been elevated slightly above the main floor. This elevation would have made the ritual space visually dominant. Even today, the curvature of the foundation remains clearly visible beneath the water. The construction materials also offer valuable clues. Most of the visible masonry consists of locally sourced stone. These stones were carefully shaped and arranged using lime-based mortar. Despite centuries of submersion, portions of the mortar still hold. This durability reflects the advanced building techniques of Byzantine engineers. Historical reconstruction showing masons cutting and placing stones. Some fragments suggest that decorative elements once existed inside the structure. Although most wall surfaces have eroded, traces of architectural ornamentation remain. These may have once supported arches above the aisles. The roof itself would likely have been constructed using timber beams. Recreated basilica interior with wooden roof structure visible overhead. Over time, those organic materials decayed completely. What remains now is primarily the stone skeleton of the building. Wide underwater shot emphasizing foundation layout. Yet even this skeletal outline allows historians to estimate the basilica's original size. Preliminary measurements suggest a structure large enough to accommodate a significant congregation. This indicates that the basilica was not a minor chapel. It was likely an important religious site within the region. Pilgrims approaching along shoreline path. As divers explored further, they identified sections of flooring that appeared unusually well preserved. In certain areas, stone slabs remain aligned in their original placement. Diver brushing sediment to reveal straight seam between floor stones. These surfaces may once have supported decorative coverings. Although no large mosaics have yet been fully uncovered, small fragments hint at their possible existence. Diver holding a tiny colored stone tessera recovered from sediment. If mosaics were present, they would have added symbolic imagery to the worship space. The discovery of even a few tesserae suggests the interior may have been more elaborate than the ruins now indicate. Underwater artifact bag containing small mosaic fragments. Attention also turned to the outer perimeter of the structure. Here, archaeologists found evidence of an entrance area. Slightly wider gap in foundation stones indicating doorway position. This would have served as the primary access point for visitors arriving from the lakeside. Given the basilica's proximity to the shoreline, it may have been intentionally positioned to be easily reached by boat. This placement suggests a connection between travel routes and pilgrimage activity. Pilgrims stepping onto shore carrying offerings. Over centuries, natural forces reshaped the surrounding landscape. Water gradually overtook the entrance area first. Eventually, the entire structure was engulfed. Now, only submerged stone remains. Despite this, the orientation of the building still follows traditional east-west alignment. The apse faces east, symbolically toward the rising sun. This orientation reflects common liturgical design principles of the era. As researchers mapped each architectural element, a clearer three-dimensional model began to emerge. Digital reconstruction allows historians to visualize how the structure once appeared above ground. Columns standing tall, roof intact, worshippers gathered during service. Then the scene fades back to the present. Even in ruin, the basilica continues to communicate its original grandeur. And yet, architectural analysis has also raised new questions. Diver examining unusual foundation alignment slightly offset from main wall. Some wall sections appear to rest on earlier masonry. Close-up of two distinct stone layers. Sonar image showing deeper geometric pattern below. If confirmed, the basilica may represent only the latest phase of a much older sacred landscape, which means the visible ruins may be hiding even older history. For now, those deeper layers remain largely unexplored, Each architectural detail already uncovered strengthens the significance of the site. The submerged church is no longer just an outline beneath the water. It is becoming a fully understood structure once again. Yet, as the physical form of the basilica becomes clearer, another mystery begins to grow more compelling. If this location had been sacred for centuries, then what events transformed it from a thriving place of worship into a forgotten monument beneath the water? Final cinematic underwater glide, pulling away from the apse into open lake darkness. Understanding how a large stone basilica ended up beneath the waters of Lake Iznik requires looking beyond the ruins themselves and into the powerful natural forces that have shaped this landscape for centuries. At first glance, the lake appears calm and stable, but beneath the surface, the region sits within one of the most seismically active zones in Anatolia. The North Anatolian fault system stretches across this region, capable of producing devastating earthquakes. Historical records describe a particularly powerful earthquake that struck the area in the year 740 AD. This event is believed to have caused widespread destruction across the city of Nicaea. If the lakeside basilica was still standing at that time, it would have been extremely vulnerable. Stone columns, although strong under compression, are highly susceptible to lateral movement. A sudden seismic shock could have fractured load-bearing supports. Once a few key structural elements failed, the rest of the building may have collapsed progressively. After the earthquake, the basilica may have been abandoned rather than repaired, but structural damage alone does not fully explain why the ruins are now underwater. To understand that, researchers turn to geological and environmental evidence. Sediment analysis reveals gradual environmental change across centuries. These layers act like a timeline, recording fluctuations in water level. Evidence suggests that the shoreline of Lake Iznik has shifted significantly since late antiquity. At the time the basilica was constructed, the lake's edge was farther away. Over centuries, rising water slowly encroached upon the structure. Seasonal flooding may have initially covered only the lowest sections. As decades passed, the water remained longer each year. Eventually, permanent submersion occurred. One theory suggests tectonic movement altered the basin's elevation. Even a small vertical shift could have allowed the lake to expand outward. Another factor may have been long-term climate variation. Periods of increased precipitation could have raised the lake level gradually, combined with reduced evaporation during cooler climatic phases. These subtle environmental changes, repeated over centuries, would have transformed the landscape. By the time the basilica disappeared completely beneath the water, its original purpose had likely already been forgotten. Human activity may also have contributed. Over centuries, even small hydrological changes accumulate. The basilica may have spent decades partially submerged. What we see today is not the fallen church in its entirety. It is only the portion that could withstand centuries beneath water and sediment. Interestingly, the shallow depth of the lake also played a role in preservation. This stability allows researchers to reconstruct the building's layout with remarkable accuracy. Small shifts in terrain can reveal how the lake expanded over time. Each data point helps refine the timeline of submersion. Was the earthquake the primary cause, or did environmental change play the dominant role? Natural disasters often trigger long-term transformations that continue for centuries. In the case of the Iznik Basilica, the process may have been gradual enough that no single generation witnessed its complete disappearance. By the time the lake fully claimed the site, it had already become a relic of a forgotten era. Today, scientific investigation continues to piece together the sequence of events. What is certain is that nature, not war or deliberate destruction, ultimately sealed the basilica beneath the water. The lake did not erase history, it preserved it. And because of that preservation, the submerged basilica now offers a rare opportunity, a chance to study how landscapes, architecture, and belief systems interact across centuries. If this site was once so important, could there be additional buildings nearby that have not yet been discovered? Final underwater glide moving away from basilica footprint into open lake bed. As the geological story behind the submerged basilica became clearer, a different, and perhaps even more intriguing question began to dominate archaeological discussions. What if the basilica was not the first sacred structure built at this location? During several excavation phases, researchers noticed that parts of the church appeared to rest on earlier masonry. These lower stones did not match the architectural techniques typically associated with early Byzantine construction. Instead, some features suggested an earlier Roman period origin. This discovery opened the possibility that a pagan temple may have once stood on the same ground. In ancient Anatolia, it was not uncommon for sacred spaces to be reused across different religious periods. Rather than abandoning spiritually significant locations, new belief systems often built directly over them. This continuity helped preserve the symbolic power of the site. If a temple existed here before the basilica, it would suggest that this lakeside location had spiritual importance for centuries. This continuity helped preserve the symbolic power of the site. Roman settlements frequently positioned temples near water sources. Water symbolized purification, transition, and connection to trade routes. Over time, as Christianity spread through the region, older temples were sometimes dismantled or repurposed. In other cases, new churches were constructed directly on top of earlier foundations. Evidence beneath the Iznik Basilica may represent exactly this type of transformation. These stones appear more massive and differently aligned. Their layout does not perfectly match the basilica's rectangular footprint. If confirmed, this could indicate the remains of an earlier sanctuary. Another theory connects the site not just to a pagan temple, but also to the memory of an early Christian martyr. Historical sources describe Neophytos as a young believer executed in Nicaea during Roman persecution. If the basilica was intentionally built near or above a martyr's burial place, it would have become a pilgrimage destination. Pilgrims in late antiquity often visited sites associated with saints. Such locations were considered spiritually powerful. If both theories are correct, pagan temple followed by martyr memorial, the location would represent multiple layers of sacred history. This concept is known among historians as sacred continuity. Archaeological investigation has discovered fragments of earlier pottery beneath the basilica layer. Their style suggests Roman-era occupation of the site. If confirmed, the site could represent a continuous place of worship spanning multiple civilizations. Building on an established sacred site meant access to existing pilgrimage routes and spiritual meaning. Yet excavation beneath the basilica is extremely delicate. Removing too much material could destabilize upper structures. Each new discovery has the potential to rewrite the narrative of the site. The basilica is part of a much longer spiritual timeline. If an earlier temple truly exists below, then the lake may be concealing an even older chapter of Iznik's history. Untouched for nearly 2,000 years, the submerged basilica may only be the visible tip of a much larger archaeological complex. And if that is true, Lake Iznik may still be hiding structures no one has ever seen. As exploration around the submerged basilica progressed, researchers began to widen their search beyond the immediate footprint of the church. If one significant structure could remain hidden for more than 15 centuries, it raised an unavoidable question. Could there be more beneath the lake? Teams conducted extended geophysical surveys using advanced sonar systems. These scans began revealing subtle anomalies, faint geometric shapes that did not match natural formations. Some of these shapes appeared aligned. Others suggested foundations buried deeper beneath layers of sediment. Diver lowering a probe into a marked location away from the basilica. At first, researchers remained cautious, archaeologists discussing results quietly beside the shoreline. Natural rock formations can sometimes mimic architectural patterns. Underwater footage of irregular natural stones for comparison. But repeated scans across multiple seasons produced consistent results. In several locations, the shapes maintained straight edges unlikely to occur naturally. This suggested that the basilica might not have been an isolated building. Instead, it may have been part of a broader lakeside complex. In antiquity, the shores of Lake Iznik were active zones of settlement. Warehouses, docks, and religious buildings often clustered together. If the basilica once stood near a harbor, additional infrastructure could still remain submerged. Reconstruction of small harbor installations. Underwater exploration following a faint linear ridge beneath sediment. Divers have already identified several stone alignments extending away from the main church. Some appear to run parallel to the ancient shoreline. Overhead underwater shot showing alignment direction relative to the basilica. These could represent walls, pathways, or boundary structures. Diver placing marker flag beside newly identified feature. However, heavy sediment cover makes confirmation difficult. Fine silt drifting back over exposed stones. Excavating a wider area requires significant time and resources. Research team reviewing logistics aboard boat. Even so, the possibility of additional buildings has already captured international attention. News reports began describing the site as one of the most intriguing submerged archaeological locations in the region. Some headlines even speculated about the presence of a lost lakeside settlement. Wide cinematic shot of the lake surface at sunset. While archaeologists avoid dramatic conclusions without evidence, the data continues to raise compelling possibilities. Scientists pointing to sonar anomaly on monitor, screen displaying large faint geometric outline beneath sediment, marker buoy floating above unexplored area, underwater shot showing undisturbed sediment field, reconstruction showing annex structure near church, Roman-era lakeside complex visualization, time-lapse reconstruction showing water covering multiple buildings, underwater shot revealing just foundation edges of nearby anomaly, multiple small anomalies visible across mapped survey grid, diver examining a low ridge of stones barely protruding from sediment, broken masonry fragments clustered together, divers documenting coordinates using underwater navigation device, researcher comparing sonar image with underwater video feed, composite survey maps slowly filling with marked locations, reconstruction showing ancient shoreline populated with structures, CGI panorama of ancient waterfront district, ancient boats transporting goods across calm water, merchants loading cargo near wooden pier, underwater sediment covering potential structure outlines, planning session with maps spread across table, diver deploying measuring tape across newly flagged area, sonar sweep moving slowly across lake bed, careful sediment removal revealing only a few centimeters of stone, conservation specialists stabilizing exposed section, wide underwater shot showing multiple marker flags across survey zone, aerial drone shot showing survey boat moving methodically across grid pattern, close underwater shot of newly exposed stone edge, reconstruction showing interconnected buildings along shoreline, underwater glide across open lake bed fading into distance, research team watching sunset over the lake after a long survey day, still lake surface reflecting evening sky, final cinematic underwater glide pulling away from the apse into open lake darkness. As the submerged basilica of Lake Iznik gradually revealed more of its structure, attention began shifting from discovery alone toward preservation and long-term protection. Archaeologists understood that uncovering the past also carried a responsibility to protect it. Freshwater environments can preserve ruins for centuries, but exposure to oxygen and modern activity can quickly accelerate decay. Excavation teams adopted a careful balance between research and conservation. Instead of removing large sections, many parts of the basilica are intentionally left in place. This approach ensures that future generations of researchers will still have access to intact evidence. As news of the discovery spread internationally, interest in the site expanded beyond the academic world. Cultural heritage organizations began discussing how the submerged basilica could be presented to the public without damaging it. One proposal suggested transforming the area into an underwater archaeological park with controlled access. Floating observation platforms could allow non-divers to see the submerged structure through viewing windows. Any future access would require strict movement controls and protective barriers. Discussions also include creating a research and interpretation center near the shoreline where visitors can explore digital reconstructions interactively. Iznik already holds immense historical importance, and the submerged basilica adds another layer to that legacy. Efforts have focused on monitoring environmental conditions and water chemistry to prevent deterioration. International experts contribute specialized conservation techniques to ensure it remains stable for centuries. Digital photogrammetry allow researchers to analyze the site without repeated disturbance. Virtual underwater tours could allow anyone, anywhere, to explore the site. Recognition at international heritage levels has been discussed to ensure legal safeguards. Local communities and students become involved through educational programs. For many, the discovery has transformed their understanding of the lake. Any future tourism must prioritize preservation above access. Lake Iznik has preserved the basilica for over 15 centuries. Protecting the basilica may also protect discoveries that have not yet been made. Final cinematic shot, still lake surface at twilight. As the submerged basilica of Lake Iznik moved from discovery into long-term study, its impact began extending far beyond the shoreline where it rests. What was once a faint outline beneath shallow water has now become one of the most discussed freshwater archaeological sites in the region. For historians, the site offers rare physical evidence of early Christian architecture preserved almost exactly where it once stood. Most ancient churches that survive today have undergone centuries of reconstruction, walls replaced, roofs rebuilt, interiors modified across generations. But beneath Lake Iznik, the basilica remains largely untouched since the moment it collapsed. This makes it an invaluable reference point for studying original construction techniques. Architectural historians can analyze spacing, materials, and orientation with unusual accuracy. Even the alignment of the nave and apse contributes to understanding liturgical design of the era. The site has also influenced how archaeologists approach shallow water excavation. Techniques refined at Lake Iznik are now being adapted for use in similar locations elsewhere. The discovery also reinforced the importance of aerial and remote sensing technologies. Without aerial photography, the basilica might still remain hidden. In this way, the Iznik Basilica has become a model for future exploration. Physical evidence from the site helps confirm written records about early Christian presence in the region and provides context for how religious landscapes evolved. The submerged basilica highlights how much history can remain hidden even in well-studied regions. International academic interest continues to grow. Papers analyzing the site's architecture, geology, and chronology are now widely circulated. This ongoing dialogue is central to scientific progress and the value of interdisciplinary research. Geology explains environmental change. Architecture reveals construction methods. History provides cultural context. Together, these perspectives create a more complete narrative. For students and future researchers, the basilica has become a teaching case. Documentaries and media coverage have introduced the discovery to global audiences. This visibility encourages further funding and preservation support. Researchers emphasize caution against sensationalism. The basilica is important not because of myth, but because of evidence. Interpreting the past incrementally through disciplined data analysis, step by step, evidence by evidence. The submerged basilica of Lake Iznik is part of that ongoing process, a catalyst for further discovery. Because beneath the surface of history, there are always more layers waiting. Final cinematic shot, sunset reflection across still lake. The waters of Lake Iznik appear unchanged from day to day. Fishermen continue their routines. Waves move gently toward the shore. And from above, nothing suggests that beneath this quiet surface lies the remains of an ancient sacred structure. Yet just below, stone walls rest exactly where they were placed more than 15 centuries ago. Columns that once supported a roof now lie scattered across the lakebed. An apse that once held prayer now exists only as a curved line of submerged masonry. Time did not erase the basilica. Instead, time preserved it. The lake became a protective archive, a place where history remained untouched while centuries passed above. Empires rose and fell, religions transformed, cities expanded and changed. But beneath the lake, the basilica remained still. Its stones continued to hold the memory of a different world. Today, only silence remains. Yet that silence speaks. Each stone reveals how early communities built, worshipped, and lived. Each layer of sediment preserves evidence of environmental change. The submerged basilica is no longer just an isolated ruin. It has become a bridge between disciplines, between geology and archaeology, between faith and architecture, between past and present. And yet, even now, the lake has not revealed everything. Anomalies remain beyond the mapped structure. Stone alignments continue into unexplored areas, possibly the remains of additional buildings, or perhaps something entirely unexpected. For archaeologists, this uncertainty is not a frustration, it is motivation, because every unanswered question represents another opportunity to learn. The submerged basilica reminds us that history is rarely lost completely. Sometimes it is simply waiting to be rediscovered. Lake Iznik has guarded this structure for over 15 centuries. Now modern science has begun to reveal its story, but the lake still keeps part of its secret. Perhaps beneath deeper layers lies the earlier temple many suspect, or perhaps history has only revealed the first chapter. As the camera rises, the ruins fade from view. The lake appears calm again, silent, unchanged. But beneath that silence, history is still waiting. Final underwater glide moving away from basilica footprint into open lake bed. But beneath the lake, the basilica remained still. Its stones continued to hold the memory of a different world. A world where pilgrims may have gathered beside the shoreline, where candles once illuminated painted walls, where voices echoed across stone columns. Today, only silence remains. Yet that silence speaks. Each stone reveals how early communities built, worshipped, and lived. Each layer of sediment preserves evidence of environmental change. Each discovery connects written history with physical reality. The submerged basilica is no longer just an isolated ruin. It has become a bridge between disciplines, between geology and archaeology, between faith and architecture, between past and present. And yet, even now, the lake has not revealed everything. Anomalies remain beyond the mapped structure. Stone alignments continue into unexplored areas, possibly the remains of additional buildings, or perhaps something entirely unexpected. For archaeologists, this uncertainty is not a frustration, it is motivation. Because every unanswered question represents another opportunity to learn. The submerged basilica reminds us that history is rarely lost completely. Sometimes it is simply waiting to be rediscovered, waiting beneath landscapes we believe we already understand. Lake Iznik has guarded this structure for over 15 centuries. Now, modern science has begun to reveal its story, but the lake still keeps part of its secret. Perhaps beneath deeper layers lies the earlier temple many suspect, or perhaps history has only revealed the first chapter. As the camera rises, the ruins fade from view. The lake appears calm again, silent, unchanged. But beneath that silence, history is still waiting. Final underwater glide moving away from basilica footprint into open lake bed.